Busy day for the Orioles on Monday. A tough loss to the Blue Jays in extra innings and a couple of big roster moves. Kyle Stowers is here, but Heston Kjerstad is back in AAA. I'll break it all down coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Orioles fans, today is Tuesday, May 14th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap a tough Orioles loss, falling 3-2 to the Toronto Blue Jays in 10 innings on Monday night. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from that one, including another great start from Corbin Burnes, a little bit of shakiness from Yennier Cano, and the Orioles' bats, besides their star catcher, really falling flat. Then we'll get to all of the roster moves that the Orioles made on Wednesday. Kyle Stowers is back. Austin Hayes is back. Ryan McKenna is gone. And Heston Kjerstad is back in AAA. I'll tell you why the Orioles made all of those moves coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb and use code all lowercase lockedonmlb for a first deposit match up to $100. So we start today's episode with kind of a tough loss for the Orioles. Blue Jays 3 and Orioles 2 in 10 innings. The final score from Oriole Park at Camden Yards on Monday night in Game 1 of a 3-game set, the first meeting of 2024 between the O's and the Jays, as the Orioles had the lead in the 8th inning, but could not hold on. And with the loss, they dropped to 26-14 now through 40 games in the 24 season. And as I scroll the schedule here, this is some fantastic podcasting. Did the Yankees play on Monday? They did not. So the division is all even between the O's and the Yanks. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' loss to the Blue Jays on Monday night. The first thing you need to know is Adley Rutschman had himself a career day. Now, there wasn't much other offense going on for the Orioles, and we'll get to that, but it was the first career multi-home run game for Adley Rutschman. And it was against a pitcher he's had a lot of success off in the past. A solo homer in the 4th for Adley, hit it 425 feet into the flag court, 108 off the bat, off of Jose Barrios to open the scoring and put the Orioles up 1-0. And then his very next at-bat, he did it again in the 6th. This one, not nearly as much of a moonshot, just 96 off the bat, 372 feet, but it counts just the same. Put the O's up 2-1 in the bottom of the 6th inning. Also, off the Toronto starter, Jose Barrios. Adley is now 12 for 29 with 3 home runs in his career against Barrios, who, of course, was the guy who Adley hit his first career homer off of. This is the first pitcher in baseball that Adley has at least 3 home runs against in his career. And the other thing that was nice is a lot of Adley's power has come from the right side this year. He hit a homer on Sunday from the left side, and then 2 more homers, both from the left side on Monday night as well. He had the batting average. He was up over 300. Now the power is starting to come around as well for Adley Rutschman. Second thing you need to know from the Orioles' loss on Monday night is, unfortunately, besides Adley, the O's offense didn't muster up much against Jose Barrios, who was basically untouchable besides the 2 solo home runs in this game. He only allowed 3 hits in general. The only other hit was a Ryan O'Hearn 2-out single in the bottom of the 1st inning. Now, O'Hearn almost had a homer of his own. The very next pitch after Adley's first homer in the 4th inning, he blasted a line drive out towards the bullpen in left center field. Dalton Varsho made an amazing leaping catch to rob O'Hearn of a homer. And then that was kind of it for the Orioles against Barrios. 7 innings, 2 runs, 3 hits, 4 Ks, a walk, and those 2 home runs. They had only 5 hard hit balls against him, just couldn't really square him up. Barrios, I mean, he's been great this year. He's now got a 2.82 ERA. He was just dotting that sinker wherever he wanted. I mean, it's a pitch he basically kind of sits 94 with that sinker and just threw it wherever he wanted to all night long. The 4-seamer as well, but mostly that sinker. He was getting a lot of ground balls, a lot of early contact, which allowed him to pitch deep into this game. Only walked 1 batter. The O's only drew 2 walks on the night and 3 hits total. They just had no traffic on the bases. whether it was against him or whether it was against, Jimmy Garcia has been incredible this year. He struck out the side in the 8th. Jordan Romano gave the Blue Jays a scoreless 9th and 10th to pick up the win. The O's just tough offensive day Sunday, another tough one on Monday. Just outside of Adley and O'Hearn as well, who had a hit and almost had a homer too. Just didn't look great at the plate. And the third thing you need to know from the O's loss Monday is that the Orioles outfield, I would say specifically, has been scuffling at the plate. Now, for Anthony Santander, who did have an 0 for 4 in this game, it's been more of a season-long thing, but he's actually swung the bat better as of late. Even with the 0 for 4 Monday, his OPS is over 800 in the month of May. He had a 4-game hitting streak coming into this game, which was snapped. He's starting to hit for more power. Of course, had the big game-tying homer in the 8th back on Saturday against the D-backs. And of the 3 guys I'm going to mention, Santander had the best game because he led off the bottom of the 10th with the Orioles trailing 3-2 with the zombie runner Ryan Mountcastle on second. And Santander did his job, hit a deep fly ball to right field that allowed Mountcastle to tag up and get to third with 1 out. And that's doing your job when you're playing for 1 run in the 10th. But otherwise, the big struggles are Colton Cowser and Cedric Mullins right now. And Cedric Mullins is getting a lot of the publicity for his struggles because his season-long numbers are much worse. We know how good Cowser was early in the year. He was the AL Rookie of the Year in April. He was great, whereas Mullins had 1 hot streak, but has really struggled most of the year. After an 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts on Monday, he's now hitting 185 with a 592 OPS on the season. He's hit for a little power, like his home run number is there, but pretty much nothing else is for Cedric Mullins. And he was the final out of this game. 1st and 3rd, 2 outs, down 3-2 in the 10th. First pitch, ground out second against Jordan Romano to end the game. And Romano was facing Jordan Westburg with the runner on 3rd and 2 outs. And Westburg, who had the walk-off hit Saturday, has been great this year, has 2 walk-off hits. Romano walked Westburg on 5 pitches. Now, you could argue, okay, he had a base open, but you don't really want to put the winning run on base in the bottom of the 10th inning. That was pretty clearly not an intentional walk, but one of those intentional walks. Romano pitched around Westburg to get to Cedric Mullins. Not a good sign for Mullins, and he grounded out of the game. People aren't really talking about it as much, again, because he's been so much better throughout the season, and he still has an 831 OPS total. But Cowser, who did draw a walk on Monday, otherwise had an 0 for 3. Mullins is 2 for 28 in May with 11 Ks. Cowser is now 4 for 32 in May with 11 strikeouts. And his strikeout that he had in the 10th inning, I will go out on a limb and say that was the worst at-bat by an Orioles hitter so far in 2024. There's probably some others I'm forgetting, but after Santander moves Mountcastle to 3rd with 1 out, you're down 3-2 in the 10th. Your job is Colton Cowser. However you do it, even if you get out, bring that run home, tie the game, at the very least, get this game to the 11th inning. Cowser fouls off a pitch, takes one in the dirt, swings and misses at a high fastball, which was a strike that he went after. And then on 1 and 2, Jordan Romano with Alejandro Kerr basically stood up and was like, I want a higher fastball out of the zone. They were trying to get Cowser to chase a high fastball for the strikeout. Romano throws 98 right down the middle. Now, Romano's a good pitcher. Cowser's struggling a bit. I'm not expecting him to turn on it and hit a 2-run walk-off homer. But at the very least, you need an emergency hack and to foul off that fastball down the middle and live to see another pitch. Cowser takes strike 3 right down the middle in the biggest spot in the game for the 2nd out of the 10th inning with Mountcastle still standing on 3rd. I mean, the only explanation is he was looking slider. Romano is only a 2-pitch pitcher. He only throws fastball and slider. So it's not like you're looking for a lot of different pitches. Now, both of his fastball and slider are elite pitches, but still. So if you're looking for slider, you have to be ready to at least react to foul off a fastball in the zone. And he was so lost at the plate that he couldn't even react to a fastball down the middle to just get a foul ball to see another pitch. Just stood there like a statue and took it for strike 3. It was not a good look. And it reminded me of what Jackson Holliday did kind of right at the end of his time in the big leagues this year. He was up with the bases loaded and 2 outs in Kansas City. It wasn't nearly as big of a spot. It was like the 6th inning. The Orioles were already winning the game. But he took a 3-2 fastball right down the middle for a called strike 3 to end the inning with the bases loaded. And you almost looked at it and said, Holliday was guessing breaking ball and was hoping for an RBI walk, and he just took a pitch down the middle. Holliday was sent down shortly after. Now, Cowser's not getting sent down. He's been too good for the rest of the season. But it is just interesting to see that have his struggles lately gotten to a Jackson Holliday level. He's looking a little bit lost to the plate right now. We're talking about Mullins getting days off. Maybe Cowser needs a day off or two, and The roster moves we'll talk about coming up next may help the Orioles be able to do that. But the fourth thing you need to know from Monday night's game is that on the pitching side for the O's, Corbin Burnes was good once again for the Orioles. Now, his 2 strikeouts were actually career low for Corbin Burnes. Strikeouts haven't been as high. Walks have been a little higher this year for the Orioles, but it hasn't really mattered because he's still been great. 6 innings of 1-run ball for Burnes on 6 hits, 2 Ks, 2 walks, 85 pitches, just 3 hard hit balls. Now has a 2.68 ERA as an Oriole. It was an interesting outing where he was through 5 scoreless and he was being very efficient. Got in that 1 jam in the 4th inning, but got a big couple of strikeouts to get out of it. But otherwise, the Blue Jays had nothing against him. And then they just started to rally a little bit in the 6th, a 1-out walk, then a bloop single, then Vogelback's RBI single tied the game. And then Burnes' big pitch got Kirk to ground into a 6-4-3 double play to keep it tied at 1. And it was kind of interesting that Burnes at only 85 pitches, Adley got him to lead back in the bottom of the 6th, did not come back out for the top of the 7th with a 2-1 lead, 85 pitches, 7, 8, 9 due up in the Blue Jays order. And Brandon Hyde said after the game, he felt that Corbin Burnes emptied the tank in the 6th inning. That's why he didn't come back out there. And Burnes kind of said the same thing when the media talked to him. So if Burnes and Hyde are in agreement, I'm totally fine with the decision. And you could tell, like, not every pitch is equal when you look at pitch count. And when you're going that hard in your previous inning, sometimes it can be tougher to regroup and come back out there. And I don't mind the decision that Brandon Hyde made. Just, hey, Orioles, let's get Corbin Burnes some run support. Remember, they were shut out in each of his last 2 starts. At least they got him 2 runs in this one, but still not a lot of offense. You only need to get Corbin Burnes a couple of runs generally to get some wins here. And you'd like to win some more Corbin Burnes starts. They're just not doing that right now. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 3-2 loss to the Blue Jays in 10 innings on Monday is that the bullpen pretty much held its own. Shout out to Craig Kimbrell, who, again, embracing his new role, came out there in the 7th. He goes 1-2-3 in the 7th inning with 2 strikeouts to keep the Orioles up 2-1. Unfortunately, Yennier Cano, pitching for the 4th time in 6 days, just did not have it. Hung a changeup, gave up a solo homer to Dalton Varsho in the 8th to tie the game. Only homer he's given up this year that wasn't on a slider. He doesn't give up a lot of homers. He leads the league with a 72% ground ball rate. It is tough when he gives up a homer because he never does it. Just hung one, didn't have good command, walked the next 2 batters, and came out of there. But the O's bullpen after that was really good. Danny Coulombe, 1 pitch, got a double play to escape the jam, keep the game tied at 2. Jacob Webb, nice 1-2-3 top of the 9th inning. Webb with a little bad luck on a bunt single from Ernie Clement in the 10th, then got a pop out. They turned it over to Keegan Aiken. He got a ground out, was trying to get the double play. They couldn't turn it. That allowed the go-ahead run to score, but he got Bo Bichette to fly out to keep it at a 3-2 game. And the Orioles offense just couldn't do anything. The O's pitching was good. Jay's pitching with Garcia and Barrios and Romano was just better on Monday night. And that was the difference as the Orioles fall to the Blue Jays in game 1 of this series. But the O's did get some reinforcements with some roster moves on Monday before the game. And a couple of big ones I wanted to break down. Kyle Stowers and Austin Hayes are here. Ryan McKenna and Heston Kjerstad are not, with a little shakeup in the Orioles outfield. We'll break down all those moves coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks for me is the most fun way to play daily fantasy sports. You don't want to miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your Prize Picks entries, whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, first inning runs, whatever it is. Just pick a stat on Prize Picks and they say more or less. So say it is Adley Rutschman, more or less than 1.5 home runs tonight. Well, he probably won't do it again. That's tough to do back-to-back nights. So maybe you take less, you get it right, you win money. It's that easy on Prize Picks. You can win up to 100 times your money on not just baseball, but the NBA playoffs and all the Prize Picks entries over there as well. And they make the app super easy, and you can make the entries in like a minute. It's that quick. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100 at Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So the Orioles fell in a tough one, 3-2 in 10 innings to the Blue Jays on Monday night. Tough to play 3 extra inning games in your last 5. The O's had won each of the previous 2, the one in DC and the one at home against the D-backs, but couldn't pull this one out on Monday night. But wanted to next get to the roster moves that the Orioles made before Monday's game, because they were two kind of significant ones. And the first one was obviously the biggest one, and that is that Kyle Stowers is back in the big leagues for the first time since May of 2023. Now, Stowers, when he got to Baltimore and talked to the media before Monday's game, made it very clear that he thought it was cool that he actually got demoted on Mother's Day of last season and never came back to the bigs. Remember, he started last year, made the opening day roster in 2023, went 2 for 30 and went down to AAA, got hit in the face by a pitch, had a separate injury, and never made it back up to the big leagues. Well, it was on the evening of Mother's Day on Sunday that the O's let him know that he'd be coming up on Monday. So kind of a 1 year later full circle moment for him. But Stowers rejoining the Orioles. And in AAA this year, he hasn't been his best self, but he's been pretty solid. I mean, 36 games, 135 plate appearances. Stowers hitting .240 with a .315 on base and a .541 slugging. He's got 11 homers, which is nice to see. He's been one of the best power hitters for Norfolk. He's one of the best home run hitters in Norfolk Tide's history. That kind of explains Kyle Stowers' career so far. 8% walk rate, 27% strikeout rate, basically what you expect from Stowers. Now, he's hit only .205 against lefties, but still has shown power against left-handers and .815 OPS. Although you don't really want to look at splits in the minors because there's not a lot of good lefties down there. And Stowers has always hit lefties well in the minor leagues. Interesting part of this call-up is Stowers actually hasn't been hitting that well lately, has just a 189 average and a sub-700 OPS in the month of May down in Norfolk, and his hard hit numbers are a little bit down this year compared to last year. 91.2 mile per hour average exit velocity is still good, but not usual Stowers. 45% hard hit rate, still very good, but not the Stowers we saw last year, which was elite. Last year, 94.3 miles per hour average exit velocity, 57.2% hard hit rate. That was ridiculous. He's still barreling up baseballs in AAA, though, and generally is still swinging the bat well. Now, we know it didn't go well in the majors for him last year, but it was kind of a solid opening for Stowers in 2022 when he came up in August. 34 games, 98 plate appearances, hit .253, had a 109 WRC plus, had that crazy ninth inning homer against the White Sox after he was just great in AAA in 2022. So the question kind of becomes, okay, why is Kyle Stowers getting this call? And it was to replace Heston Kjerstad on the roster, who was optioned to AAA Norfolk to make room, and we will get to that in a moment. But I think it really mostly boils down to this. You just want a better defensive option with a guy who can still hit, who's going to sit on the bench, because we'll talk about it in a moment. But Kjerstad was here for 2.5, 3 weeks. And I mean, he didn't play much for those 3 weeks, and he was mostly in a bench role. And you'd probably rather have a guy who can still swing the bat, but can give you more defensive versatility, especially with Cedric Mullins struggling. And honestly, now with Colton Cowser struggling, you're going to want to sit both of those guys a little bit more just to give them a break, maybe reset them. And if you're going to sit both Cowser and Mullins in one game, which I could see them doing maybe even on Wednesday with the left-hander Kikuchi on the mound for the Blue Jays, you're going to want better defenders out there because you're not going to have a lot of options. And remember, at Camden Yards, you basically have 2 de facto center fielders out there because left field is so massive. Heston Kjerstad, just not really a guy, although he did start out there on Saturday, not really a guy who's going to play that position. So you'd like an option who can play left field, and Stowers can play center in an absolute pinch if you need him to. I'd still rather have Cowser out there and obviously rather have Mullins out there. For Stowers, I think the role is going to be similar to Heston Kjerstad. He might start a few more games than Kjerstad did, only because he's just a better defender in both left and right field. But he's better defensively. He can even play center field if you need him to. He might start a little bit. He can still hit, but he's not going to play a whole lot. He's going to be a bench bat for the Orioles. He could be in that kind of similar Kjerstad role where he was mostly there to pinch hit for either Arias or Mateo in a interesting late game situation. He'll get those chances, I would think, just like Kjerstad did. Maybe a starter more too, but not like he's not going to play crazy more than Heston Kjerstad did. And quite honest, this doesn't mean that Kyle Stowers is going to be here for the rest of the year. This doesn't mean that Heston Kjerstad is going to be in AAA for the rest of the year. I think the Orioles are still trying to figure out how to kind of perfectly mold this roster right now. Like Heston Kjerstad wasn't a perfect fit, but I don't know if Kyle Stowers is a perfect fit as a bench bat on this roster right now. But Kjerstad wasn't playing a lot and was struggling a little bit when he was out there. So I'm okay with making that switch, right? Get Stowers up here, put him in a very similar role to what Kjerstad was in, and just see what he can do. And Stowers is a guy who was already on the 40-man roster, right? He's already had 2 different stints in the major leagues over the past 2 seasons. And Kyle Stowers, really more than any other Orioles prospect, and I think he's graduated prospect status, but he's still kind of in that mix because he's a younger player. More than anyone else, he has proven that he has nothing else to gain and nothing else to learn from being in AAA Norfolk. Like, statistically, one of the greatest power hitters in Tide's history, like climbing up the home run charts because he's played so many games in Norfolk. Got there in 2022, dominated there in 2022, and has been there for good chunks of the last 3 years and has been hit in the middle of the order. It's just, if you're going to have a guy up here who's going to not play as much, and it's between Stowers and Kjerstad, and you want one to get regular at-bats and one to say, he's done enough in AAA, let's just help us out on the bench. This is probably the right way to do it. Kjerstad back in AAA and Stowers in the big leagues. But again, it's not like it's going to just stay like this for the rest of the year. A fluid situation right now on the Orioles roster. But also, of course, want to talk more from the Kjerstad angle, because he still is a better player overall, I think, than Stowers, and has a higher ceiling than Stowers. So why is he not here anymore? And why is Stowers the guy? We'll get into that to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Policygenius, which is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. Policygenius saves you time and money, so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. And with Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options even offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Now, life insurance is a tough subject to tackle. It can be tough to talk about. It can be emotional to talk about. Policygenius is there to help you. Not only do they help you compare all of your options from all the top companies out there, but they have a team of licensed experts who is on hand to help you pick, but also help talk you through it, because it's a tough decision to even get yourself to start thinking about it. It is hard to think about getting life insurance, but Policygenius is there to help you every step of the way. That is how they make it so easy on you and make it as painless as it possibly can be. So check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonmlb or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonmlb. So as Kyle Stowers rejoins the Orioles for the first time in 2024, a move had to be made to open up a spot on the roster for him. That corresponding move was optioning Heston Kjerstad back down to AAA Norfolk. Now, Kjerstad came up about 3 weeks ago for the first time this year after not making the opening day roster. Members spent like the last half of September with the Orioles, was impressive, was on the postseason roster, even though he wasn't used in that ALDS. But there was basically room for either him or Cowser on the opening day roster, and Cowser was just so impressive that Kjerstad got sent to AAA. But when Jackson Holliday struggled and went down, Orioles won a different left-handed bat. Kjerstad was swinging it super well in AAA Norfolk, and he came up to the big leagues. But as I stated on the episode right after Kjerstad was called up, I called it. I said, Heston Kjerstad is definitely not going to be an everyday player for the Orioles. And quite frankly, there's not going to be a lot of spots for him to get a start, because if you looked at where you'd want Kjerstad in the game, okay, generally you would want him, DHing first base or corner outfield against a right-handed pitcher. And you look at the Orioles roster. Ryan Mountcastle plays every day at first base. Ryan O'Hearn playing every day against righties at DH. Those 2 spots out. Anthony Santander, everyday player, right field. Colton Cowser, everyday player, left field. And especially at that point, when Mullins was swinging the bat well, Cedric Mullins, everyday player in center field. You just had nowhere to get Heston Kjerstad in there. And I talked a little bit about, well, maybe he would play actually more against lefties than righties, but it's not something the O's like to do with their young left-handed hitters, is expose them to a lot of lefties early on when they get to the big league. So I basically said, listen, the O's will find some spots here and there to start Kjerstad, and they did. I believe he started 4 games of the 17 that he was here, but he only had 17 plate appearances, 2 for 14, couple of singles, 6 strikeouts, 2 walks, and didn't really hit the ball hard, and was kind of shaky in the field, both in left and right field when he was out there. But in general, I said, look, he's going to be here to be a pinch hitter, because with Jackson Holliday in AAA, that meant either Jorge Mateo or Ramon Arias would be starting and most likely hitting 9th every single game for the Orioles. And I said, listen, Mateo swinging the bat generally well. Arias, though, hasn't been good. you're going to want somebody who can pinch hit for one of those two guys in a big spot late in the game. I said that's going to be Kjerstad's role. That's pretty much exactly what his role was. That's why, he still got in 7 games total and still got total of 17 plate appearance, because he got some of those pinch hitting roles. There just wasn't a spot for him to play. And I didn't mind him being here in that bench role. I thought, listen, he's done a lot in AAA. There's probably not a lot for him to develop more. He's a good option to be that pinch hitter, but it was still going to be tough for Kjerstad to not get regular at-bats and continue to fully develop into the player the Orioles want him to be. And they probably were balancing, okay, how much do you harm his development by doing this? How much has he developed already? He's older, but he missed all that time in the minor leagues. It was probably a tough balance for the Orioles. And it may have been that when they called Kjerstad up, they knew, and honestly, not may have been, it definitely was. They knew it was going to be a short-term thing for him to be in this bench role. They weren't going to keep him in this role for the next 4 months, just being a pinch hitter and starting like once a week at best. That wasn't going to be his role for the rest of the season. They probably knew, okay, maybe Stowers will come up. Maybe we'll get Mayo up here. We'll definitely have Jackson Holliday back here at some point. And, Holliday on the team would have made it even tougher for Kjerstad to get into the lineup. But the big thing comes out here is that A, they were probably not going to be a long-term solution anyway. And B, with Cowser and Mullins struggling, you want a bench outfield bat who can play better defense in left field at Camden Yards and can potentially play center field. And Kyle Stowers, although he's not the greatest defender in the world, is absolutely no doubt a better outfield defender than Heston Kjerstad is. While Stowers' bat isn't as good, he's got more big league experience, and his bat is at least comparable to Kjerstad's, where he can still give you something as a left-handed power hitter at the plate. So that's really the difference. Kjerstad's bat a little bit better, Stowers' defense better. In a bench bat role, you're looking for that defense more than the offense, at least as a whole. And that's why Stowers just kind of fits better in this role. And similar to Kjerstad, as I already said, it's not going to be permanent for Stowers. He'll probably be in this role for a few weeks. Then maybe that's when Jackson Holliday comes back. Maybe in June, they're ready to bring Jackson back and the option Stowers back down to take that spot. That is certainly a possibility here. Now, the big thing just to notice with Kjerstad is with him just starting the 4 games, a couple in the outfield, the Orioles clearly don't trust his defense right now. And that doesn't mean it can't get better and it can't get to a higher level. But if he were either a better defender or, quite frankly, if he were a right-handed hitter instead of a lefty, just with the way the Orioles roster plays out right now, he would have played more. But unfortunately, I don't think the O's trust him out there. They've shown it by the fact that they didn't put him in the outfield late last year. They've shown it by their unwillingness, I should say, to put him out there this year. And when you have O'Hearn and Mountcastle, Kjerstad can't just kind of be mostly a DH and get regular playing time. It's just not possible on this roster. And this is something I said on Twitter, which is really the big point here. Like, yeah, Heston Kjerstad could have made a little bit more of the 17 plate appearances and done a little bit better in the field where he struggled, but it's still kind of an impossible ask. Like, hey, prove to us you're worth playing every day in 17 plate appearances. That's unfair to ask of a rookie hitter. No doubt about that. But here's the thing. I would argue the main reason why Kjerstad wasn't on the opening day roster, and the reason why even when Kjerstad got here, he was barely, and the main reason why he back down in AAA is that in theory, his spot on this year's roster, his path into almost an everyday role, was the role that Ryan O'Hearn is currently playing. And Ryan O'Hearn just happens to be arguably the best hitter on the Orioles right now. So that is the main reason. He's just being blocked by a guy who is producing at a crazy level and has been awesome. I can live with that. I can live with Heston Kjerstad, a guy I love at the plate. Let's not get this wrong. I've said it many times on this podcast. I think Heston Kjerstad's ceiling of his bat is one of the highest ceilings of any Orioles hitting prospect. Like, I am in love with Heston Kjerstad as a hitter. But I can sleep at night knowing that the reason Kjerstad's not here is because Ryan O'Hearn has been this good and is easy to pencil in the number 3 spot in the Orioles order every day. Like, that is okay with me. And that's unfortunately for Heston, just kind of where we're at right now. But I'll tell you right now, he's going to be back this year. He could have a bigger role when he comes back. So just keep your eye on that. It's not yet time for him to displace Anthony Santander. He can't displace Mullins because he can't play center field. And it's hard for him to displace Cowser because you got to play left field at Camden Yards, which is like a second center field. And I'm not sure Kjerstad's ready for that. Don't worry. He will be back. Now, the O's did make 2 other roster moves on Monday. The one was Austin Hayes is back. Didn't start on Monday. We'll probably see him back in the lineup for the first time Wednesday when the lefty Kikuchi is out there. Hayes, who had the calf injury after just a horrendous start to the season, was out for a good chunk of time, looked good in his rehab in AA Bowie last week. He rejoins the Orioles. And as we figured, the national nightmare is over for now. Ryan McKenna was DFA'd to make room for Hayes on the roster. At the very worst, even if Hayes continues to struggle at the plate, he is a better version of the role Ryan McKenna was playing on the Orioles roster right now. Right-handed hitter, starts against a couple lefties, plays a good defense in the outfield, can maybe pinch run for you or pinch hit if you need to. That is better than McKenna. We're gone from McKenna this time, but I'll tell you, earlier in the season when the Orioles DFA'd McKenna, nobody claimed him. I think it could happen again. McKenna will probably end up back in AAA Norfolk, and we'll probably see him in the big leagues again at some point this season with the Orioles, because that's his role. He will not go away, but hopefully maybe the rest time with Hayes, the regroup, at the very least, maybe he can be like a nice platoon piece with either Mullins or Cowser, can maybe play a little center field as well. If Mullins and Cowser are struggling and his bat comes back a little bit, I mean, it's got to come back at least a little bit because it was dreadful. And it gives Cowser and Mullins maybe a chance to sit against some lefties. And you can now get Austin Hayes into that lineup. There was one other move that the Orioles made. They did claim right-hand pitcher Corbin Martin off waivers from the Brewers. He had options. They immediately sent him to AAA Norfolk. We'll get into his story and why the Orioles claimed him coming up on tomorrow's episode, where we'll also recap Game 2 between the Blue Jays and the Orioles. First, before we go, though, getting very close here to 7,000 subscribers on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who likes, comments, and subscribes to the Locked On Orioles podcast on YouTube. Continue to do it. Once we do get to 7,000 subscribers, we will do a fun giveaway. Something cool that's behind me is going to be given away to a YouTube subscriber, but you got to be subscribed to enter the contest. So make sure and go and do that. And it's going to kind of line up with me being very close to 1,000 episodes. What you're listening to right now is episode number 993 that I have hosted of the Locked On Orioles podcast. Basically, late next week, we are going to hit 1,000 episodes, going to do a little celebration for that. It's going to include a giveaway as long as we get to 7,000 YouTube subscribers. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. That'll do it for today. Again, tomorrow we're back recapping Game 2 between the Orioles and the Blue Jays. It's Kyle Bradish making his third start back from the injured list. He's looked good in his first two. Orioles bullpen will be, they don't have as many guys they'd like out there, so you'd like a little more length out of Bradish. He'll go up against Chris Bassett, who hasn't been great this year, has a 5+ ERA in 8 starts. The O's have gotten to him in the past. See if they can get to him again tonight. And I am back tomorrow to recap that game and tell you more about the newest Oriole right-hander in Corbin Martin. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.